What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, May 19th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room answering the phone, ready to put you on the air. Obviously, the big news today is there has been another tragic airline accident. This is Egypt Air Flight 804, vanished over the Mediterranean on a flight from Paris to Cairo. And rather surprisingly, it had no sooner disappeared than everybody was saying, oh, had to be terrorism, couldn't possibly be a mechanical fault. And this rush to judgment before they'd even found the wreckage, I mean, to me, that's a red warning flag. It's like when Malaysian Airlines 17 crashed in Ukraine and immediately said, oh, Russia shot it down. Absolutely no question, Russia shot it down. Normally when there's a crash, everybody's going to be saying, we don't know until we get the evidence and look at it. And there are already reasons to question the onboard bomb or terrorism, mostly because there was this series of sudden swerves in the aircraft before it went down. According to Greece's defense minister, which sounds like evasion tactics to me, and I'm not the only person who was out there saying that, because we have this ex-NTSB investigator, Greg Fife, saying commercial planes don't make abrupt turns. And he's saying it's hard to understand why the plane would take evasive action. Those were his words. Now, a couple of things to remember. First of all, air traffic radars do not track aircraft. They track aircraft transponders. A non-transpondered target would not show up on ATC radar. So we cannot rule out that Egypt Air 804 was taking evasive action from some kind of a real threat, such as a military missile, because it is a tragic reality that dozens of civilian aircraft have been accidentally shot down by the military over the years, including the Atavia DC-9 incident, which also happened over the Mediterranean. And we know everybody is around that part of the Mediterranean with their weapons, and they're playing, and they're having drills and doing all that stuff. We know that TWA 800 was shot down by accident during a test of the Aegis CEC. There's a growing body of evidence that the Malaysian airline that vanished over the Indian Ocean was shot down by accident by a military exercise. We know the USS Vincent accidentally shot down an Iranian Airbus. These things happen. It's a matter of historical fact. And the reason we need to be looking at this is apparently residents on a Greek island spotted what they called a fireball traveling horizontally through the sky, and they got it on video, which looks to me like a missile of some kind. And so, again, all we can really honestly say is we don't know, which makes this sudden rush to declare it all terrorism highly, highly suspect, in my opinion. Now, there's another take on all of this, going on the assumption that it was an act of terror, is apparently the gate at Charles de Gaulle Airport, where Flight 804 departed, had security provided by the same Israeli firm that provided security to all the gates used by supposedly the 9/11 hijackers, the shoe bomber, the crotch bomber. Boy, with a track record like that, why do they keep getting these security contracts? There's also been another crash. They lost a B-52 bomber in Guam. The crew made it out alive, was not an attack, just either mechanical failure or pilot exercise. Apparently was in a training exercise, and all 7 crew members had to abandon the aircraft before it burst into flames, which sounds to me like it was some kind of a mechanical failure there. All right, so let's get on to the campaign here, because things are really heating up. And we're seeing where Trump is mounting a fierce comeback, and he's closing in on Hillary Clinton's national lead. In fact, right now, when you average all the polls together, it's pretty much neck and neck. And Trump is trending up, and Hillary Clinton is trending down. And it's getting very, very tight out there. Now, back on May 2nd, okay, Trump pulled in front of Clinton in a Rasmussen Reports poll 41-39. Today, that same poll has Trump at 42 and Clinton at 37. The trend is my friend. Article coming out of Information Liberation saying that Trump has basically destroyed Hillary's lead over him in under 3 weeks. And he's leading in 2 national polls, and including Fox News, which didn't like Donald Trump whatsoever. Now, here we have this story coming in from the Political Insider talking about 3 Republicans ready to enter the presidential race and challenge Trump. Now, Trump has already beaten 16 challengers to become the presumptive GOP presidential nominee. We're still expecting all kinds of shenanigans at the GOP convention. And now we're hearing these reports on a major effort by conservative movement leaders to come up with 3 new challengers for Donald Trump. They're going to go into the convention with 3 new challengers. And what's really interesting about this story, not once in there do they ever talk about challenging Hillary, about coming up with these new challengers to prevent Hillary from getting the White House. It's totally focused. We have to get rid of Trump. And it's like I was saying only yesterday, this election is not about Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative. This is about the insiders wanting to keep their iron-fisted grip on the throats of the American people. And they don't want an outsider, which Trump is. Now, Camille Paglia has come on out with an interesting article looking back at this New York Times smear piece from last Sunday, saying that the politically correct feminists have misfired. This attempt to smear Donald Trump has failed miserably. You've already had 2 of the women who were mentioned in that article come forward to say that their quotes were taken horribly out of context. Things were being cherry-picked to make it look like Donald Trump hates women, which is a big campaign push by the Hillary Clinton campaign. She's trying to reacquire the vaginista vote because she's been losing in that demographic. And the New York Times, after all the time and effort and money and resources put in, this is the best they could come up with. And Charles Krauthammer is correct in saying if this is all they can find, there isn't anything else out there. Meanwhile, Juanita Broderick, who was raped by Bill Clinton, has called the New York Times out for refusing to cover that story, pretending like all of Bill Clinton's sexual assaults and rapes and the rest of it aren't newsworthy, given that he is the husband of the presumptive Democratic candidate. So Donald Trump has escalated the situation. He came out and he used the word rape when he was doing an interview with Sean Hannity on Fox News. And it's kind of interesting because the corporate media, they've gotten into this blank word. We're using the N word here. And now they're starting to say, oh, Donald Trump used the R word for Bill Clinton. We know what he means. Go ahead and say it. Bill Clinton has been accused of rape numerous times during his entire life. And when the New York Times goes on out and tries to create this image that Donald Trump misbehaves toward women, then they basically opened up the issue for a debate. Because all the New York Times article really found out about Donald Trump is there's this very rich guy who likes to hang out with beautiful women. Oh my goodness, what a shock. How will we ever deal with that? And now all of a sudden, Bill Clinton's past indiscretions and Hillary's enabling of them and her attacks on the victims are now fair game. And Bill Clinton's crimes go all the way back to Yale and Oxford. And apparently there was this woman named Wellstone claimed Bill Clinton raped her in 1969. And even though the school found her accusations credible, there was political pressure not to go forward with this because of the embarrassment of having a Rhodes Scholar charged with rape. It's all politics. He's been protected all along. So there was Eileen Wellstone, 19-year-old, claimed she was raped, was covered up because he's a Rhodes Scholar, and Rhodes Scholars don't do things like that. 1972, 22-year-old woman told campus police at Yale that she was sexually assaulted. And retired campus policemen confirmed the incident happened, and it got hushed up. The woman refuses to have her name made public. She's been threatened or bought off. Let's see, 1974, female student at the University of Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was a school instructor, tried to trap her in his office. We know, of course, about Juanita Broderick. While Clinton was serving his first term as a governor, the state troopers were aware of at least 7 complaints from women who said Clinton forced or attempted to force himself on them sexually. Carolyn Moffett, legal secretary in Little Rock, 1979. Elizabeth Ward, the Miss Arkansas beauty pageant winner. Paula Corbin, Sandra Allen James, Christy Zerker, and Kathleen Willey. Now, Kathleen Willey is a very shocking story because she went to the White House trying to get a job because her husband, Ed Willey, was a top Clinton fundraiser. And she figured, I'll get a job in the White House. Bill Clinton basically groped her out in the Oval Office, put her hand on his nether regions, and this was all taking place on the exact same day that Ed Willey died under highly suspicious circumstances. And you need to remember that Ed Willey was one of 4 top Clinton fundraisers who all met strange deaths within the first 6 months of Bill Clinton's term in office, including White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. And things are just getting a little bit stickier for Hillary because Yoko Ono has now gone public that she had an affair with Hillary Clinton back in the 1970s. It's amazing. Now, the Washington Post is out there trying to put out all these little fires, and they had an article trying to basically gloss over the fact that Hillary Clinton was laughing about how she got this rapist she knew was guilty off by absolutely destroying the victim on the stand, saying, oh, you just fantasize about sex with older men. That's and the rest of it. Now, we know Washington Post is pro-Hillary. We know that they have detailed no less than 20 of their reporters trying to find dirt on Donald Trump. And they're out there trying to whitewash Hillary Clinton's worst personality flaws, such as her lack of empathy, which is perfectly consistent with a sociopathic personality. Now, MSNBC did an interview where their reporter actually asked Bill Clinton about Juanita Broderick and the rape accusations, and MSNBC edited it out. They don't want the public to know that this stuff is going on. Donald Trump hates women. You don't need to know what the Clinton history with women has to be. I mean, it is just really out there. Now, getting on back to last weekend's fiasco in Nevada, the state Democratic convention. And the media is out there trying to say that this was all Bernie Sanders people. They were rioting. They were throwing chairs. And it turns out that, too, was made up. The reporter, John Ralston, who is known to be very biased in favor of Hillary Clinton, actually left the convention before things started to get out of hand. And he simply quoted another individual, Andrew Davey, as saying that Sanders' people were throwing chairs. And then a video of the one incident surfaced where somebody had picked up a chair and was just holding it in the air. It was never thrown. People around him said, calm down, calm down. They put the chair down. They hugged the guy, and that was the end of it. And from this, the media tried to create this idea, the Sanders people were rioting, they're throwing chairs, how dare they just object to our stealing the nomination. They're just making the stuff up. Anything they can say to get their gal into the White House. Because if she doesn't get what she wants, she's going to start ruining political careers. She knows where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies. Now, Bernie Sanders' campaign has come on out basically criticizing Debbie Wasserman Schultz for her obvious bias during this campaign. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not interested in what the Democratic Party voters want. Debbie Wasserman Schultz wants what Debbie Wasserman Schultz wants, and that is a woman president. And it doesn't matter what kind of person that woman is. And, you know, there's a real problem in current American politics. We were all told we should vote for Barack Obama because it was time for a black president. Vote for him because he's black. That was it. That was the whole case. And we got Obamacare, surveillance. Obama has now become the president who has spent the most years of his term in office at war with somebody. Despite his Nobel Peace Prize, we've got a crashing economy, outright disdain for the Constitution. But it's all okay because we succeeded in voting for a black president. Now same people are out there saying we need to vote for Hillary Clinton because it's time we have a woman president. That's the whole argument right now. Vote for Hillary because she's a woman. I think it's time for the American people to maybe raise their standards and get away from what color their skin is or what their gender is, or in Hillary's case, what their orientation is, and start looking at what kind of a job these people are going to do for the American people. Now, the bias and abuse of the American media is so intense, it's drawing criticism. CNN and MSNBC came down on the New York Times for that attempt to smear Donald Trump, and it's just blown back in the New York Times faces. We're seeing this article in RINF.com, U.S. media as conduits of propaganda. I wish they'd qualified it by saying the corporate media, because obviously the less well-funded independent media are not out there pushing propaganda. Yes, there are some independent media outlets who have millions and millions of dollars, and yes, they have a propaganda agenda. It sort of comes in together. When you get a check with a lot of zeros in it, it comes with conditions. Another article that came on out from Investment Watch blog, isn't it funny how often journalistic errors and imprecision seem to work in Hillary's favor? And they're talking about articles that have come on out that are factually incorrect, but they always seem to benefit Hillary and her campaign, or cast aspersions on Donald Trump that were completely pointless, irrelevant. And we're seeing these articles coming out again, the Washington Post, explaining why it's perfectly okay that Hillary had her own email server. You know, you guys are just making a big deal about this. You know, she just wanted, you know, a little convenience. Well, it really wasn't convenient. I mean, private server on which government classified information is being stored was actually a violation of President Bill Clinton's executive order that no computer company that was going to set up a system exposed to classified information, they had to pass a security review. And, of course, Brian Paglia didn't pass that review, and then later on this mom-and-pop ISP out in Denver, they didn't pass it. They had Hillary's server sitting in the bathroom at one point. Hillary set up her private server to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests. And also, I think, to expedite selling of U.S. secrets to foreign governments who would then donate to her charitable foundation. Now, because Fox has been obviously on the warpath against Donald Trump, their ratings continue to slide. Megyn Kelly was out there once again trying to diss Donald Trump, and every time she opens her mouth, Fox's ratings decline even further. It's time for the political process and for the corporate media to remember the basic tenet of a democracy. The will of the people is the law of the land. And you ignore the mass of the people at your own peril. Now, there's been a new development in Hillary Clinton's email server. There's a lawsuit, one of many. This one's from Vice News. And they're out there asking for certain documents related to how the server was set up and used, and their Freedom of Information Act request was rebutted on the claim that the materials they sought, were part of a pending or prospective law enforcement proceedings. It's one of the indications this is a criminal case, not a security review. More about this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about this Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that was brought against the Department of Justice by Vice News. And what's going on here is the government rejected the Freedom of Information Act request, saying that the documents being requested were part of a pending or prospective law enforcement proceedings, and they did not go beyond that. Now, Vice News has gone into court reminding everybody that for that exception to the Freedom of Information Act to apply, the government is required to actually specify the individual and the crime that is being investigated in order to justify withholding documents. And they have to prove that there's a connection between the individual and the criminal act and the documents. And they're back in court. And this has backed the FBI into a corner. Either they're going to have to release the documents, which include emails Hillary thought she had deleted from her server but were recovered, or the FBI is going to have to publicly acknowledge there is now a criminal investigation against Hillary Clinton. This thing is building and building and building. Now, the former Attorney General, Mukasey, is out there, and he's saying something I've been saying for quite some time. Hillary is disqualified from holding federal office because of one of the provisions of Title 18. And basically, Title 18 says, whoever having the custody of any such record, proceeding, map, book, document, paper, or other thing willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, that's an important point, mutilates, remember how she told Jacob Sullivan to strip the classification headers off, obliterates, falsifies, or destroys the same, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 3 years or both, and shall forfeit his or her office and be disqualified from holding any office under the United States. The corporate media is not reporting on this, that Hillary's mishandling of classified documents bars her from being the president. So we got to share that information with everybody. Now, another article coming out from the Daily Mail, more details revealed on Hillary's Wall Street speeches. And they don't really talk about the speeches. They're talking about how Hillary handled it. And Andrea Mitchell is out there saying that Hillary's wounds are entirely self-inflicted. And you have to question her judgment. You have to wonder what she was thinking. Now, Hillary got all this money from Wall Street, supposedly for making speeches, but won't release the transcripts of the speeches. Maybe there aren't any. Maybe there weren't any speeches. These are just bribes, but they put speaking fee on it because writing bribe on the memo line on the check is a little embarrassing. Maybe that's what went down. Now, Bernie Sanders is out there, and he's still campaigning, and go Bernie. You have to admire, he's taking the high road, he's weathering all of this cheating going on by the Clinton campaign and by Debbie Wasserman Schultz here. And he's out there asking a very valid question. Why are we spending trillions and trillions of dollars on war when there is so much that needs to be done right here in the United States of America? We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's what's going on. When you are in war, all of the nation's wealth goes to the war machine, and the nation is allowed to decay and decline in the hope that once victory is assured that they'll be able to sort of patch things over, which may or may not work. There was, past tense, a proposal in the House of Representatives to bring to an end the 2001 authorization for the use of military force. And it was just voted down. The House voted it down, 285 to 138. Now, that 2001 authorization for the use of military force was Congress abandoning its constitutional authority and mandate to decide when and where the nation goes to war. And you need to remember, when George W. Bush activated the authorization for the use of military force in 2003, he lied, claiming that Saddam had these banned weapons and that he was involved in 9/11. Now, fraud negates consent. It was an illegal war, the AUMF notwithstanding. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and let's take a couple of phone calls. Pete in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You mean Western Israel, right? Not Eastern.
I don't... I'm sorry. Where did I say that?
No, in the last segment, you were talking about Eastern, America's Eastern Israel.
Oh yeah, yes.
I'm just, I got something for you for either was it yesterday or the day before segment about this dual nationality, dual citizenship.
Yes.
Fraud here, and the 1940 Nationality Act, Section 401E, states that a U.S. citizen, whether by birth or naturalization, shall lose his U.S. nationality by voting in a political election in a foreign state.
Boy, there it is right there. I mean, Ted Cruz's mother was on the Canadian election rolls, so she lost her U.S. citizenship at that point.
But this is more specific to American Jews. The law was tested many times. In 1958, for example, some Mexican tried that, and the court shot him down. But in 1967, an American Jew, Baez Afroyim, received an exemption that set a precedent exclusively for American Jews. Because
imagine my shock.
I know, right? Mike, my friend, I don't know what we do here. We're watching these, everybody wants to argue about a police state. My thing is, the problem is the judges, because the judges are the ones who need to be set straight. If we were going to do all this stuff by the book, then the judges are the ones who need to be straightened out. And, if there are judges who are allowing people, of course, it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And, of course, at the time, the one deciding vote was, guess who? Abe Fortas, a Jew, and decided that this guy, the court held that the U.S. government had no right to rob Ephraim of his American citizenship by voting in another election. I'm thinking, what? You're voting in another country's elections. Where is where do your loyalty stand?
Well, I mean, it's more fundamental than that we have this group of individuals in our country who honestly feel that the law should not apply to them. And it's not just this idea that they can vote in foreign elections and still keep their U.S. citizenship. It's like the fact that AIPAC is not required to register as a foreign policy lobby. They always want special treatments and exceptions. The law not to apply because of the Holocaust. You've got to let us get away with this because of the Holocaust. And boy, don't you just get sick of the whining after a while?
I get sick not only of the whining, but I get sick of the exceptions to the rule, Mike. I mean, if we have a law that means you break it, then you're guilty. There's no such thing as, well, we're just going to make an exception for these people. That doesn't make any sense to me, Mike.
And not only that, it violates the Equal Protection Clause. There are not supposed to be changes to the law based on somebody's ethnic group, nationality, gender, or orientation. Yeah, like this Black Lives Matter. Well, all lives matter. And putting this added emphasis on the blacks is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause.
I hope you and Claire had a great dinner the other night.
We did.
Happy to pay for that, so take care, buddy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alan in Texas. Aloha, Alan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thanks. I want to talk about the TSA for a minute. You had a caller a couple of days ago who was talking about we should boycott the airports because of the TSA, and I just want to concur with that opinion, and also to say that I have been refusing to fly commercially for about 10 years now, and my rule here is that as long as the TSA is there, I will not fly. And that's the message that I want to send out to the airports and everybody that makes money at the airport. They're not going to get a penny of my money until they get the TSA out of there.
I mean, if we accept the official story about this Egypt Air crash, it just proves all this airport security isn't working. It isn't working. TSA, in 15 years, has never actually found a terrorist, and anywhere between 3/4 and 90% of the practice bombs sent through to test them get through. They're complete waste of money. And, what I'd like to do as we get into the summer travel season, I'd like to see all of America just for 1 month just not fly commercially. And you will see the airlines screaming that this situation has to stop. If you want to have security, it's got to be smooth and transparent, not make us wait 3 hours and miss our flights to force us into this little extortion racket. $85 and we'll let you bypass the line here. If you don't pay the protection money, something bad is going to happen. You're going to maybe miss your flight. Maybe your luggage is going to wind up down in Cleveland or something. That's what they're doing. It's an extortion racket.
Absolutely. And I want to add also that I love to fly. I have a pilot's license, and I love to fly. And one thing, and you probably already know this, but I want to share this with their listeners. And one of the reasons why I agree with you about the thing about 9/11 is the fact that as a private pilot, I know that there's two parts to the airport. There's the commercial side where most people go and the commercial jets are, but there's the private side where the small private pilots fly out of. And when I was flying, there is no security there. That means that all this time, anybody who wanted to do some kind of terrorist thing could have done it. And that proves to me that there are no terrorists. The whole time I was flying, we just walk out there, get in the plane. It was never a problem. This is after 9/11.
Yeah.
I got my pilot's license in around 2008. And so my point is that a lot of people don't understand that. There's another part of the airport where there is no security and nothing happens. And that's what I try to tell people. If there were terrorists, they would have exploited it years ago. And so I encourage all Americans, boycott the airports, make an ultimatum and say, look, we're not going to give you any more money as long as the TSA is there. And I invite all Americans to join me in my boycott, and I've been doing it for 10 years, and I think everybody can do that.
I absolutely agree here. Now, unfortunately, here in Hawaii, I don't really have much choice. The ferries were all shut down by the car rental companies and the airlines, so we don't have ferry service anymore. So when we get off this rock, we have to use an airplane, even to go to the neighboring islands, which is weird. We have to stand in line for 2 hours to get on a flight that lasts 25 minutes. I mean, that's how absurd the situation is, on aircraft that couldn't possibly reach anywhere in the world other than the next island over.
I just want to add also that, remember, there is another way to fly. There is non-commercial flights. So there are ways to fly without going through the TSA, and I'm not sure how many people are aware that that is actually an option for some people who can afford it.
Well,
so anyway,
that's the question. I can't afford it. But, well, thank you very much for the phone call. But if you are on the mainland and you're getting ready for your summer vacation, travel plans, you're going to a family reunion or a wedding or something like that, think about just driving. Gas prices are low right now, historically, and cross-country driving is a lot of fun. You get to see a heck of a lot more. You know, you get to stop at the little roadside attractions, like Stuckey's if they're still in business, all the little tourist things along that you would normally miss when you're in that airliner at 35,000 feet. Remember that movie that came out, Cars, the very first one? That movie was written by somebody who was old enough to remember the original Route 66, and I'm old enough to have been along Route 66. It was a cultural experience in and of itself, with all the little places you could stop at, all the little tiny attractions, the Sinclair dinosaurs, and all the rest of it. It was a big part of American history. And we need to bring that back. There's no rule that says you have to be in a jet plane to get where you're going, especially if you're not in a rush. And I would suggest you start doing that, or take the train, or take the bus, because the TSA has made air travel miserable. It's adversely affected our tourism here in Hawaii, which is why locally we call the TSA the Tourism Suppression Agency. And they are out of control. All right, let's get on back to the news here, the war zones emphasis. RINF.com is reporting that ISIS is not, in fact, in retreat, because ISIS is working for the U.S. They're just in Libya to serve as an excuse for the U.S. to go back into Libya and slap down the Libyan people and say, look, once we conquer you, you stay conquered. You learn to love your puppet rulers. Well, bad things going to happen to you, like your luggage goes to Cleveland. Wait, I'm mixing my mafia thug things here. But doesn't it all seem like the entire U.S. government is operating like an organized crime family? It really does. Now, the U.S. is using an Italian island in the Mediterranean to launch surveillance aircraft into Libya. This is the island of Pantelleria in the southern Italy. Actually, now that I think about it, very, very close to where that Egypt airplane just came down. Poland is calling for permanent troops on the Russian border to counter Russian aggression, because we're putting all of our tanks and troops along the border with Russia because they're acting aggressively. 150 Danish soldiers to be stationed in Estonia to ward off Russian advances. What Russian advances? The only people advancing are all these NATO troops advancing up to the border with Russia. Do they really think we don't understand what's going on? Do they really think that we don't know who the aggressors are? Do they really think we are that stupid? Apparently, if this expose by Congressman X is the real deal, yeah. Washington, D.C. is still operating on the basis that we're all a bunch of idiots who will believe anything fed to us by the corporate media. NATO has announced their new war policy against Russia. Their goal is to encircle Russia. They're going to basically garrison Russia and cut it off from the rest of the world so we can keep that gosh darn ruble from interfering with the dollar and the euro. It's just absurd. They're trying to get a war. They're at least getting the Cold War back because they missed the good old days of the 1950s and 1960s when they could just take gobs of money away from you for weapons and stuff and not have to actually worry about taking care of the roads and the quality of the water and anything like that. And all they had to do was wag Russians at you and you would obediently wet yourself and fling your babies into whatever war zone the government was coming up with. And they yearn for those days. They miss those good old days. And they're trying to get them back. There's a big difference. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, the American people were very trusting of the government. And when the government said the Russians are bad and we're good, most people would go along with that. Today we know it's different. Kennedy actually nailed it on the head when he was talking about détente with Russia. We all walk on the same planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. They're just people. And they want the same things that we do, peace and prosperity. It's only these sociopaths in these high political offices that want to play the great game of world conquest and create a global government and sit on that golden throne and say, I'm the ruler of the world. I think we need to build a mental hospital for all these New World Orderists. And what we'll do is we'll set up all the patient rooms like throne rooms with curtains and drapes and lights and guys, with halberds standing guard. And there'll be a big golden throne, and we can put these people on the throne, and they can scream, I'm the ruler of the world all they want, and they'll be harmless because they're going to be inside this mental hospital. I think it's a good suggestion. They'll be happy. We'll be happy. We'll avoid the wars and economic devastation. I think it's a good idea. We need to work on that as a plan. Now, there's a British general, General Sir Richard Sheriff, at one time was the second highest NATO military officer. And he's out there openly saying that a nuclear war with Russia in 2017 is entirely plausible. It's perfectly reasonable. You might as well get used to it. And yeah, we're going to see some very important cities just vanish in a blinding flash of light. And there'll be radiation sickness and cancer and leukemia. But really, this is a very plausible thing for us to do. And I know why he's saying it. The United States, which is the primary armorer of NATO and supporter of NATO, is run down. It's exhausted. We don't have the 4 M's needed to prevail in war. We don't have the manufacturing. We don't have the money. We don't have the manpower. And we don't have the moral authority. And that means if they get a hot war going with Russia or China, on the day the U.S. government realizes they cannot prevail with conventional weapons, they'll start launching the nukes. And that's what this British general is trying to get us used to, the idea that, yeah, we're going to have a nuclear war. Nuclear war toe-to-toe with the Ruskies, to paraphrase out of Dr. Strangelove. So they're out there trying to sell you the idea that, yeah, nuclear war, sure, it's okay. Well, no big deal here. France is starting to show a little hesitation about what's going on. Now, as you know, the United States has built this very expensive European missile defense system and is talking about turning control over these missiles directly to NATO. France, for some reason, is not thinking this is a particularly good idea, and they're starting to drag their heels on that. there are indications that this attempt to encircle Russia may be in trouble because Algeria is starting to say we're not all that hot about what's going on in Europe and the United States, and they're starting to move closer to Russia because of a very simple reality. While the U.S. and Europe make war, Russia and China are making deals. Peace through commerce. Donald Trump is saying the same thing. I want to go back to being friends with Russia and China and just do trade, do business. Now, as you know, we're basically here at the Cannes Film Festival, which is, the big film festival of the entire world. And it does get politicized. And apparently, right on the red carpet, there was a protest regarding the ouster of Rousseff in Brazil, where they're saying this was a coup d'etat. And it certainly looks like it from where I'm sitting, because this is what the U.S. does. Overthrows the elected government of the people of a nation and imposes a puppet ruler. Now we know that Brazil's new so-called interim president, meaning he's permanent, is a CIA asset. That would be like having somebody who was with the KGB sitting in the White House. You can understand why the Brazilian people are very upset, along, of course, with the economic privations that they're being subject to. Now, the U.S., once again, is out there provoking China, sent a spy aircraft in to spy on Chinese actions. The Chinese sent an aircraft out to chase them away. The U.S. is out there saying, what you did was unsafe. The way your plane came close to ours was very unsafe, bad China. And China's saying, look, stay out of our skies, and we won't have to do that. Every time the U.S. does another provocation, the propaganda is going to be China made us do it. China's the bad person. How dare they defend themselves from our aircraft? We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're basically talking about how the U.S. keeps provoking China. The U.S. is desperate to get into a war against the ruble and the yuan before the U.S. economy really does implode and they can't stop it from happening. And the U.S. keeps pushing at China, and now they're trying to make a stink over the fact that China actually got up and got in the way of a spy plane. And the U.S. is trying to say, well, this is just a routine U.S. patrol. We're always patrolling around with these big airplanes with telescopes and antennas and radios and stuff. That's just normal behavior for the United States here. And, of course, China has a somewhat different view, saying that the aircraft was flying over China's province of Hainan and violating their airspace. Now, claiming that China is acting as a hostile power, pot, meat kettle, kettle, meat pot, the U.S. is considering ending the arms embargo with Vietnam to try and to basically start selling some of these overpriced, ineffective weapons to Vietnam, who probably are going to decide they need to go someplace else with their dollars, unless the U.S. gives them tons of foreign aid with which to buy these weapons, which means you're going to pay for them all. There may already be a hiccup in that because there has been a lot of unrest in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and the Vietnamese government is saying this is more of these U.S.-backed non-governmental organizations kicking up unrest, leading to the destabilization of the current government. And maybe that's what the U.S. was thinking. You know, we'll put in a new puppet government, we'll lift the arms embargo, and we have another asset there to use against those evil Chinese. But the U.S. is getting ready to do something really, really big because the Pentagon just ordered 177,000 of the armor plates that are used inside the body armor. When you have body armor, there's the outer part that's the Kevlar, but there's also a metal plate over the more vital organs to deal with ammunition that's designed to penetrate Kevlar. And so anytime they put out a huge order for something like this, it's because something is being planned that the current stockpiles cannot cover. Out in California, they're introducing a new law that would punish companies that boycott Israel. And the guy who proposed this was out there saying boycotts of countries often derive from ethnic, religious, racial, or nationality discrimination, which directly contradicts the values of California citizens. There are two problems with this. First of all, the problem with Israel isn't ethnic, religious, racial, or nationality discrimination. It's their behavior that's the problem. When the former government of South Africa was practicing apartheid, it was okay to boycott them. The current government of Israel is practicing apartheid on the Palestinians. It should be okay to boycott them. Boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest protected under the First Amendment. Also, this loser in California seems to be unaware that there's already a federal law that makes it a crime for American companies to boycott Israel. They can boycott anybody else they want, just not Israel, because Israel's exceptional. Israel is chosen by God. We don't question Israel. Got to take a break for station ID. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go ahead. This is hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Tim in California. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I wanted to get your opinion. I thought it was a bad idea that Trump met with the New World Order king there, Kissinger. I thought he should have maybe refused to meet with him. I mean, he's just all about pretty much do what we say.
Well, let me back up here a little bit. I think what's going on here is that Donald Trump is now beginning to realize that he is as dangerously naive about what's really going on inside the U.S. government as Jimmy Carter was. And if you want to know what the U.S. has been up to, Kissinger's the guy to talk to. Now, I don't know who initiated the meeting, whether it was Donald Trump or Henry Kissinger. I think Donald Trump is understanding he's got to bone up on what's really been going on, or he's going to walk into a trap during the debates. And so I don't think it's entirely a bad thing that he's talking to Kissinger. I certainly would not like to see Kissinger as part of the Trump White House. But Donald Trump does need to learn what's really been going on inside the U.S. government, or he can be set up for an embarrassing failure by the Clinton campaign between now and November.
Do you think Kissinger being in like those, societies and all that is really going to let him know what's up?
Well, it depends on whether Kissinger thinks that he's got a shot at a position in Trump's administration, or even if he wants it. And but again, until we know what went on in the meeting, it's kind of hard to say. I know it's being fanned up as being a bad thing. I'm not sure it really is until we see the end result.
Okay, and then just one other thing. How do you think Trump is going to be like super on the Israel side? Because his son-in-law is his son-in-law is Jewish and has a lot of investments in Israel. How do you think that's going to kind of play out with Trump?
So far, it looks to me like Trump kind of wants to walk a balanced line and go back to this model where the United States is an impartial arbiter between Israel and Palestine. And so far, he's his speech at AIPAC was really very good. It was aimed at American Jewish citizens, and it seemed to resonate with them. But if you go over and you look at the Israeli media, they are absolutely horrified at the idea of a Trump presidency, because Trump might actually dare to say no to them. And especially since 9/11, Israel's just gotten used to the idea that they can ask for anything from the U.S. government, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how much of a war crime, and they'll get it. They want Hillary in the White House because she is absolutely owned by Israel, and she'll do whatever Israel wants, even if it means sending millions of Americans off to fight Israel's wars. So, again, the true measure of Trump versus Israel is in the Israeli media.
Yes, okay. Well, thanks for your time, Mike.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. Getting into the economy, the protests in France are continuing against what is being called labor reform, but is in fact more austerity. And Hollande is still out there saying he absolutely is not going to back down, that these reforms need to be put through because his masters at the European Central Bank are saying, you must make the people of France poor so we can be rich. Actually, the plan of the New World Order people is they have to crush the economies of all the nations on earth down to the level of the poorest nation that's out there. Otherwise, when they drop the borders, everybody's going to be scrambling all over the place trying to get to a better place, like the people in the Middle East are being encouraged to do in Europe, and the Central and South Americans and Mexicans are being encouraged to do here in the United States. And by the way, apparently one of the Mexican airlines is offering free airfare to Mexican citizens to get them up near that border with the United States. It's a giant mess here. All right, we're going to grab another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I'll tell you, I wish I didn't think this, but I do. I think based on, there's a ton of people, including the guys who wrote the Israeli lobby. There's a ton of foreign policy people that he could have met with to get the scoop on what's really going on. Instead, he met with who he met with, which was Henry Kissinger, a Zionist ogre that he could have, here's Simon Wallace, who I was thinking about, among others.
Okay, Peter, Peter, just something you need to consider. Trump is meeting with a lot of people. But the media, which is trying to give us Hillary, picked up on Kissinger and put it out there to try and cast doubt on Donald Trump. Do you think Kissinger's the only person that Donald Trump is meeting with?
No, but he's taking $100 million from Sheldon Adelson. $100 million. You give somebody $100 million, you own them.
Maybe. Look, here's what it comes down to. Everybody's out there saying Trump could be this, Trump could be that. But we know what Hillary Clinton is, okay? So let's take
I'm not arguing that,
okay,
Mike.
well then let's take a chance on Donald Trump here, because we already know from the last quarter century what a Clinton presidency is going to do to this nation. Hillary Clinton has absolutely no reason to change any of the agendas the insiders have been forcing on us for the last 2 decades. That's an absolute set in granite fact. So let's roll the dice on Donald Trump, okay?
Well, you know, Mike, Haim Saban and all those guys who own Hillary.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Sheldon Adelson has been giving her money as well.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right.
All right. Well,
I hope that we don't get more of the same.
Well, if we vote Hillary, we will get the same. Susan Sarandon nailed it on the head. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo is not working. Trump is the best alternative we've got right now, and I'm not agreeing with everything that he says, and I agree it probably wasn't the smartest thing for him to meet with Kissinger. He probably met with Kissinger thinking nobody would notice, but it is being put out there by the media because to elicit the reaction that you have. Ooh, bad Donald Trump. He's talking to Henry Kissinger. Trump's probably talking to everybody. You know, Trump's talking to a lot of people. The media doesn't fan that up. They're putting this out there to tarnish Trump's image with those of us who think the country is going in the wrong direction. Anyway, Peter, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We've got to get on back here to the economic news. Caterpillar has seen its retail sales fall for 41 consecutive months. And yes, they sell a lot of those D9 armored bulldozers over to Israel, and that market is still apparently doing very well. But what this tells us, this is an upstream indicator of the economy. It means that construction is down in the United States. Road work is down in the United States because that's Caterpillar's primary market, is the heavy machinery used to build and maintain the United States of America. And for their retail sales to have been in decline for 41 straight months is another indicator. We're in a wartime economy. Every single penny generated by the American people is being spent on bombs, bullets, bandages, and butter. Now, down in Texas, as you know, they're getting ready to have their own state gold reserves. And they're looking at completing their depository and their gold-backed state bank to be completed next year. Texas looks to be following the example of North Dakota of having a state bank to manage the Texas economy as a public utility. And this may be, in fact, this is a necessary first step to Texas possibly seceding from the United States. And there's a lot of talk about that in Texas. Not just in Texas, in Alaska, here in Hawaii, the Western States Coalition. The states are just totally fed up with the out-of-control arrogance of the federal government, which, by the way, was the cause of the American Civil War. It had little to do with slavery. Freeing the slaves was the political device Abraham Lincoln used to motivate the North to invade the South. What it was really all about was re-enslaving those Confederate states back to Washington, D.C., primarily because at that point in history, most of the nation's gross domestic product was coming from those southern plantations and knitting mills. It was always about money. Now, here's an alarming article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Employment growth has come at the expense of wages growth. And this absolutely makes sense. There's only a finite amount of money still out there flowing through the economy. Most of it has been sucked up by the private central banks and the money junkies. And so if they're going to hire more people, they have to pay the people less. And again, this is part of a pattern where all of the world's economies have to be crushed down to the level of whichever nation is the poorest so they can drop the borders. But it's a reminder there is insufficient currency flowing through our economy to keep it running. That's why every time they come out with a new tax, and they say this is going to solve our problems, we're going to have a carbon tax. Well, every time they hit another tax, Obamacare, carbon, whatever, Americans are having to go without something else. As the health care costs go up, people are missing meals. They're buying less food. The net gain in economic activity remains a constant, held in place by the finite limit of the available money supply. And that means the net gain on tax revenues remains a constant. It's not improving the situation. It's just a fight between, which corporation and which federal agents or which government agencies grabbing what's left out there. But until new wealth is brought into the bottom of the economy, nothing is going to change. Over at Breitbart, they have an article with a very alarming headline, "The Seeds of Revolt. American families owe trillions of dollars in debt they cannot pay off." The average American household has credit card debt around $16,000. They owe $27,000 in their auto loans, $48,000 for their student loans, and an average of $169,000 on their mortgages. Our entire economic system is designed to plunge the people into debt, slavery, and keep them there forever. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Are you there?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Oh, sorry. I think I had you on speaker there. I didn't mean to.
Okay.
I had to pause there. I just, that was a great, I don't know what you call it, diatribe, but a good one about just everything you put together there. It was amazing. But I got to just tell you a first-hand experience I just had today. A friend of mine I haven't seen for a while, who's a retired fire investigator, and a good one. I ran into him. We started talking, and I asked him. He was talking about some investigation, reminiscent about the old times. In any event, to make a long story short, I said, "What do you think happened with Building 7?" He looked at me, said, "What's Building 7?" And I just, you get that feeling like, am I in the freaking Twilight Zone here? What is building? Was there a Building 7? I mean, I looked at him, I got goosebumps. I'm like, where do I go from here? Is this?
Well, I mean, the U.S. government didn't want people to know about Building 7. It wasn't struck by a plane. The prevailing theory is that the plane that was shot down in Pennsylvania, Flight 93, was supposed to crash into Building 7. In fact, if you look at the O'Day Brothers documentary on 9/11, the firefighters are saying there's a report a third plane is headed into the World Trade Center. It just never got there. And it may be that the flight crew managed to regain control of the aircraft, and because what was on the aircraft didn't match the official story, it had to be shot down. And then they had to bring down Building 7, and they don't really have an explanation for it. It just comes right down into its own foundation. They didn't even have it in the original 9/11 report. They don't even mention it. That's how scared they were of people noticing how much it looks like a controlled demolition.
Yeah, my point is he didn't know about it. He didn't even know what there was. He goes, "What is Building 7?"
Well, because he's obviously living in the matrix of ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and the rest of it. And he's
Bingo. I think I'm in the twilight zone too, Michael, because the information is there.
Well, you have to go look for it. See, if you're just going to sit and wait for somebody to bring you information and knowledge, the people bringing it to you are going to hand you what is in their best interest for you to think and believe. Finding the truth requires active participation on your part. You got to go hunt it down. You got to be your own Sherlock Holmes and figure out what's going on.
And you got to take responsibility for taking the red pill. Thank you so much, Michael. Keep up the good work. You're great, man.
All right. Thank you very much here. We're getting a breaking headline. This is now all over the corporate media. U.S. intelligence sources say Egypt Air explosion was likely a bomb. And it's all over CNN and NBC, except senior administration officials saying there actually isn't any evidence. They just think this was the likely explanation. See the rush to judgment here? There's something stinks about this mightily. We don't know what it is. Accidental shoot down by the military? Deliberate shoot down to try and cause something going on here? And let's be very honest about it. Egypt Air does not have a good reputation for aircraft safety. They've had a long history of mechanical problems. And Egypt Air is obviously going to prefer that terrorists brought down the plane rather than it fell apart from poor maintenance. Because if it's an act of terror, they're off the hook. If the plane crashed because somebody made a mistake tightening on the engine, then Egypt Air is open to civil lawsuits from the families of those 66 people who died on it. So from Egypt Air's point of view, they'd rather say terror than we messed up the airplane. Now, an article coming out of Investment Watch blog. There's a guy saying, we're now seeing an unwind of faith in central banks. This is coming from Mike Shedlock. People are losing faith in central banks. Remember what I said the other day? Banking is not a science. It's a religion. It's a set of arbitrary rules created to take wealth from you and give it to the priests of banking. And it only works because you believe in the system. You believe this is the way the world is supposed to be. And we're all having a crisis of faith. We're all turning into private central banking heretics. Actually, what's going on here is the public is learning what private central banks really are. They are privately owned. They are in business for themselves. They do not serve the nation. They do not serve the people. They serve themselves. And by design, private central banks create more debt than money with which to pay the debt in order to trap the people of a nation in permanent debt servitude. Those private central bankers understand these pieces of paper with colored ink on them are completely, utterly worthless. There's nothing of value there. They don't represent anything. It's not like the early silver certificates where you could take it down and get $1 worth of silver at the banks. They're just game tokens, and they're worthless. The item of value is your debt servitude to the bankers. That's what's going on, and more people begin to understand it. Remember the article we did about the 11th marble? Really kind of laid it out. There was actually, apparently this Wall Street financial expert wrote an article to try and just discredit the 11th marble. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And apparently his counter-argument to the 11th marble was very quickly torn apart by other people out there. Saying, you know, all the jargon isn't hiding what's going on here. And we need to make these issues simple for people to understand, like the 11th marble. Bankers love big fluffy words and charts and graphs because they're trying to hide from you exactly what's going on. Now, John Rubino is out there saying that we face a crisis unlike we have ever seen in human history, and he's talking about how many of these emergency secret meetings that we're seeing around the world with the central planners and the bankers and the G20 and all the rest of it, you know, and how are they going to deal with the crisis? Well, in a nutshell, until the central planners acknowledge the basic instability of private central banking and its tendency to produce more debt than money with which to pay the debt, and shut down the private central banks, there's nothing they can do to prevent a global lockup. At best, they're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and they don't want to actually deal with the root cause of the economic instability and wealth inequality. They want to look like they're doing something about it to protect their phony baloney jobs and their cushy paychecks and luxurious lifestyle, but they're not dealing with the root cause. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back. We've got a caller waiting on the line after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call from Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. I'm a little off topic, but you did talk about this a while back, so I've got a Windows 10 question for you. In that I turned around and I turned my computer on today, and it was automatically updating me, giving me loading on Windows 10. I could not get out of it other than I had to push the power button for 3 seconds, hold it down, to cease the loading of that program on my computer. When I later on rebooted it and started it back up, I checked and it said failed attempt, but it automatically did it. Tried to install Windows 10. So I went back under the programs and I started looking at the programs, and I did see something on my computer that said it showed there's a couple programs on there.
All right. Well, let me cut to the chase here. You need to go out and download a tool called GWX Control Panel. It's available for free, and you need to put it on your machine and just turn it on, and it will yank all of this Windows 10 install stuff off of your machine. And at
GWX.com?
Yeah. I actually don't recall the name of the website, but you'd want to do a Google search for GWX Control Panel.
Got it.
Okay. You can do a Google search for block Windows 10, and you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of pages. Everybody is angry at this. Apparently there's a class action suit that's now getting underway against Microsoft for all the damage and harm that they have caused.
Well, there's two other programs I noticed on my computer. One of them says Window Anytime Update, and the other one says Windows Update. I wondered if I deleted those, would that stop it?
The Windows 10 upgrade is buried in so many different places in your machine, you know, if you delete one part of it, it reloads it again. You need to get one of these tools that is specifically designed to scrub Windows 10 off your machine, and you can find a bunch of them with a Google search. The one that has worked best for me is GWX Control Panel.
Got it. Thank you, Mitch.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. All right, getting on back to the news here, and yeah, it is angering. And if you are running Windows 7 or Windows 8, you have to proactively take steps to prevent the upgrade, or it's going to happen. Microsoft is just trying to force this on everybody. And if you just sit there and hope that it's not going to get to you, you're going to find yourself burned. Now, if you are on Windows XP, or if your computer is a 32-bit architecture, you're safe. You don't have to worry about it, okay? Windows 10 is 64-bit only. Getting on back to the economy, very alarming story coming out of Investment Watch blog, talking about the possibility of the government moving to seize silver and gold from private citizens in order to prop up the banks. And this article basically has an email correspondence going with the Treasury Department, in which the Treasury Department told the Gold Antitrust Action Committee point blank, yes, the U.S. Treasury Department has the authority and already has the plans to seize not only silver and gold, but anything else that might be considered a financial instrument of value that could be used to save the banks. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and they're getting ready to do that. Another little article out here basically saying the lottery, if you really think about it, it's a regressive tax on the nation's poorest people. And let's be honest, despite the huge, gigantic payouts that you see in the media to get you to go and buy tickets for the lottery, the reality is the ratio of money in to money out is very lopsided. And these are huge money makers for the governments that run them. And I remember when we got the California lottery, and they were out there saying it's for the schools, it's for education. And they got the lottery going, and immediately the state government cut back the education budget by exactly the same amount that was coming in from the lottery. So the schools did not gain from it one tiny bit. It's just another form of looting the people with legalized gambling. It's bad if you're running a floating crap game in the back alley, but if the lotteries are legal because it's the government's operation. You know, the government has a gambling casino. Look at Wall Street. So, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, House Republicans are trying to block consumers from going to court. And there was a proposal by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to restore the rights of banking customers to take their grievances to a court of law instead of a system of forced arbitration. In other words, if your bank cheats you, you should have a right to sue them. If they mismanage your portfolio, whatever, you should have a right to sue them. But this whole idea of forced arbitration is a way of protecting the banks, just like that vaccine court is a way to protect the vaccine manufacturers from really having to pay the costs of the harmful products they're putting out. It's part of the encroaching dictatorship. You as a consumer are not allowed to complain when the banks cheat you or the pharmaceutical companies poison you. So there was this proposal to restore the right of banking customers to sue banks. House Republicans threw together a hearing to scaremonger over make-believe evils, and this hearing was convened by the Republican-controlled Financial Institutions and Consumer Credit Subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee, and they called it Examining the CFPB's Proposed Rulemaking on Arbitration. And basically, the American Law Litigation Daily called the hearing seriously lopsided, and basically just ramrodded through that they're not going to allow this to happen. By golly, if the Congress has their way, you will not be able to sue the bankers no matter how much they rob you. Because banks are much more important than people in the United States of America. Don't you understand that? You're just people. You're just blobs of protoplasm. You're only good for work and breeding new workers and soldiers. But the banks, they're holy. They're sacrosanct. Have you ever noticed how much bank buildings look like churches? You ever stop to think about that? I got a real awakening one time. I was working on Lost, and we used as a location one of the really nice banks down in Honolulu. And because we were there with the production, we got to go behind that counter. And, you know, when you're in the area where the customers are, it's beautiful and it's clean and it's shiny and it just gives you a sense of strength and control. From the other side, it was all rotted and falling apart and peeling. It's a theater set. Banking is not a science, it's a religion. And like all organized, corporatized, for-profit religions, it is there to enslave you. Article coming out of Blacklisted News, how the U.S. continues to deceive the world about Puerto Rico. And basically there is a propaganda campaign about what's going on in Puerto Rico and its debt that's designed to get people to go along with this demand from the money junkies that Puerto Rico lower their minimum wage, because that's the solution to everything from the money junkies' point of view. Lower the minimum wage. We need to work them hard and not pay them anything. Oh, well, listen, if you've got a bunch of workers who aren't making enough to live on, who is going to come into your stores and buy your products? I don't understand how the money junkies absolutely do not get it, that unless there is a mechanism by which wealth can be taken from the top of this pyramid and recycled back down to the bottom, that the economy has to lock up. They just don't get it. Or they're just too blinded by their addiction. Down in Venezuela, the crisis is deepening there. People are screaming about food. Looting is now taking place across the country. And you should pay attention to what's going on in Venezuela, because it is entirely possible it's going to be happening here. When the economy implodes and the supply chain breaks down, you're going to be seeing the same things here. Which gets us back to that old riddle. How do you tell a prepper? They're the ones not eating out of the trash dumpsters. Obama has budgeted $1.3 billion for illegal minors in this country. That's $17,613 per illegal immigrant child, which is larger than the average Social Security retirement benefit. These illegals are getting more money than Social Security recipients. The illegals have not paid into our economic system. The Social Security recipients have been paying in their entire lives. Now their benefits are being cut because government's been dipping into that money. And that's something all you Hillary supporters ought to remember happened. When Bill Clinton was president, remember that magic federal budget surplus where he was out there saying, look at the federal budget surplus, it's the economy, stupid, I did a really good job about that. Well, he did it by plundering the Social Security Trust Fund. And they called it a loan, but they did this during a time when everybody said the economy was doing great. Well, if you're having to borrow, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, from the Social Security Trust Fund during economic good times, under what economic conditions can you possibly pay that money back? And the answer is, you can't. The U.S. government is already technically in a state of default. They're defaulting strategically against the American worker because they know you can't do anything about it. You can't alter their credit rating. You can't repossess. You just have to sit there and get used to eating dog food for the rest of your life. And if Bill Clinton was willing to do that, so is Hillary, because she sat there right next to him while he was doing it and thought that was a really good solution. Now, another strain being placed on our economy is coming from these refugees and illegal immigrants. And there's an interesting little story over at WorldNet Daily about how these refugees were showing up at Seattle's SeaTac airport and getting tickets for flights to Africa with suitcases full of cash. And they're getting the cash from welfare checks the refugees are getting from the U.S. government, compliments of you, the American taxpayer. And instead of taking that money that was given to them and putting it back into our economy, they're flying it home to Africa. This nation is bleeding wealth out the bottom and having it sucked out up at the top, and there's nothing left in the middle for us to work with. Right now, I would say the United States is the most poorly managed country on earth. Unless they're trying to deliberately wreck the place, and then they're doing a swell job, aren't they? Over in France, a Sudanese Muslim immigrant had gone to Europe with one of these promises that they're going to get a free house. Somebody was actually telling these Middle Eastern refugees, if you can get to Europe, you're going to get a free house. So in France, this Sudanese Muslim freeloader went to the government welfare offices and said, where's my free house? And they said, you don't get a free house. And he set the place on fire. Now, turning to Great Britain and the Brexit, the polls about leave and remain are all over the place, depending upon which media outlet is conducting the poll. The ones who are in favor of remain have polls where the overwhelming majority of the British people want to stay enslaved to the European Central Bank. And obviously those people who are in favor of freedom have polls showing that the majority of the British people want to leave. They're lying on the polls just like they're probably going to be lying on the actual referendum. We know the British government loves to cheat on elections as much as the U.S. government does. We saw that during the Scottish independence referendum, where they weren't even trying to hide the vote fraud that was going on. By the way, the latest claim from the fearmongers trying to keep Britain in the European Union is that a Brexit will put cancer research at risk. So if you vote for a Brexit, you're going to die a horribly lingering death. Really, honest, we wouldn't lie to you. We're the government. Over at Blacklisted News, they have an article that's really what this is all about. The Brexit is the real threat to globalization. They're pushing more and more of these unions. They want to turn the European Union into a federalized nation like the U.S. There's already talk of merging the North American Union and the EU to a Northern Hemisphere Union, except for those gosh darn holdouts, Russia and China. If Great Britain breaks free, it starts to unravel, because we've got several other countries in the European Union getting ready to bail. If Great Britain succeeds in breaking free of the European Union, Germany will be next, because Germany and Great Britain are the nations holding up the entire European Union's debt levels. And if Britain leaves, Germany's going to be looking at carrying that bill all by themselves. They're not going to want to do that. They're going to want to get the heck out. Finland is going to have a referendum on an exit. It's starting to come apart. And there's an article over at Global Research, The Collapse of the European Union. Return to national sovereignty and happy Europeans. Because if you think about it, all the European Union did was add another level of government control and another level of profit-taking banking on top of the existing systems. And the net result for the people of the European Union is more taxation, more meddling in their lives. The Schengen borderless model has been destroyed by the influx of refugees, and then there's the refugee problem itself. This is a raw deal from beginning to end. Nobody can point at anything that the European Union has done which has really benefited the people of Europe. Of course, it was never intended to. The European Union is there to benefit the European Union, the European Central Bank in Brussels. They don't care what happens to the people. All they want is the money and the power. So let's talk about this nonsense about the restrooms, because it's still out there. Somebody has picked up on my comment about the new signs on the restroom doors. There's an article over at Patriot Rising saying, time for penis and vagina signs. Guard charged with assault after confronting a transgender woman using the women's restroom. This happened in Washington, D.C. There was a giant grocery store, and the security guard basically told a transgender woman, meaning a guy, to get out of the women's restroom, and they've charged him with simple assault. This is an attack on our gender identity. They want us so confused about who we are and what we are that we are easier to control. Apparently 75 Target stores are bracing for protests over their going along with this idea that men can use the women's restroom if they truly feel they are women inside. Ever hear that old story about the camel's nose under the edge of the tent, and after that the camel comes in? Well, apparently the LGBT, politically correct people, the social justice warriors, aren't going to stop with people using whatever restroom they feel like using at the moment. And I think the warning shot was back in September. Salon published an article written by a self-described pedophile, Todd Nickerson, who basically has come out saying that the desire to have sex with children is no more onerous than homosexuality, wanting to have sex with somebody of your own gender. That's the next step to basically make pedophilia socially acceptable in our country. Now, I'm pretty loosey-goosey with that sort of thing regarding adults. Whatever you want to do in the privacy of your bedroom with one or more consenting adults and various plastic devices, that's your business. I could care less. Go and be happy. But I draw the line at children. I do not accept that young children understand what sex is or can give reasonable consent. That's the whole point of the statutory rape laws. Children don't know what it is they're saying yes to. And they're out here already trying to push the border to say, well, you know, the desire to sexually molest children, that's just another variation on sexuality, and we shouldn't ostracize child molesters. Yeah, we should. And I'm sorry, there's no way I'm buying into this one. You know, I don't have a problem with gays and what they're doing, but when it comes to children, I have some very primal instincts that kick in. And no, I'm not going to go along with this nonsense that child molestation is just another sexual variation like being gay. That's where they're going. Now, Susan Rice is out there making speeches to graduates of Florida International University, and she made this comment: there are too many white people in top government posts. And it puts our nation at risk because all those white people think the same. She actually said that. Now, can you imagine the reaction if Susan Rice had said there are too many black people in top government posts, or there are too many Jews in top government posts? Oh, there would be a firestorm of criticism. But not when she's out there bashing white people. When was open season declared on melanin-challenged individuals, to use the PC term? Who decided that racism against whites was now acceptable? Is the U.S. descending to the level of the current South African government, which discriminates against whites, or Zimbabwe, where whites are forbidden to own land because they're white? We seem to be headed in that direction. You don't cure racism by being racist. Susan Rice should be just called on the carpet for that comment about too many whites in top government posts. Did Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. live in vain? Whatever happened to the content of the character being the dominating force? It's amazing here. Now, not too long ago, there was a big stink about how the Tribeca Film Festival threw out the movie Vaxxed because of pressure coming from the festival's backers who have deep financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry. The film that did win the Tribeca Film Festival is called Do Not Resist, and it's a documentary dealing with the militarization of the U.S. police. Apparently is getting just absolute runaway rave reviews about how the police have basically been turned into an occupying military force to make sure that we do as we're told and that we don't try and stand up against tyranny and oppression. And that's their new job, apparently. So, very well received over there. Meanwhile, the FBI wants to keep the National Biometric Database a secret. So far, they've been good at it. Most Americans don't really understand the FBI is doing this. It's yet another giant computer data bank with information about us that can be used to track us or frame us. It's actually easy to plant phony DNA. Israel actually came up with a way to synthesize DNA to plant that will match a known record. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And down in Argentina, their economy is also in serious trouble. And apparently their Congress just passed a bill banning layoffs. They're trying to freeze the job market where it is. It's a stopgap measure. In fact, I remember back during the Nixon administration, they had a wage and price freeze mandated from the White House, which didn't really do anything except, impose a delay, which, coupled with the ending of gold convertibility, has basically put the nation on the path to where it is today. Now, the gun grabbers are out there. They're in love with Hillary Clinton. She's out there saying the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment. It's not a right of the people, even though it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No. The people means the Army, the National Guard, and all this other stuff. And the Supreme Court is wrong, and I will make the Supreme Court change this whole thing. Chelsea Clinton is out there saying, yeah, Hillary's going to take away all the guns. You, the American people, are not allowed to own these guns. We're passing all these laws here. The Mexican drug criminals are allowed to own those assault-style weapons provided by the U.S. government at taxpayer expense. And look at all the guns the U.S. government is giving to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in all these war zones all over the place. But you, the law-abiding American citizen, are not allowed to have guns. Just call 911. They'll save you from being raped, as long as your rapist needs at least 40 minutes to do what he's doing. It's just completely absurd. And this anti-gun hysteria is totally overboard. Story coming out of Activist Post over in Brighton, Colorado. Okay, there was a kindergarten student who brought a bubble-making toy to school, decorated with fairies. And it makes bubbles. And they called the parents and said, you got to come catch your kid. This kindergartner is suspended because she violated the no-weapon policy. It's a bubble-blowing machine. There's no way anybody is going to think this is a real weapon. They've just gone into complete, utter absurdity. Where is common sense in our nation? It's just completely absurd. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out if there really is some kind of a unified, coherent agenda at work, or it's just everybody's gone off the edge of the mental cliff pursuing their ideologies without regard to what it's really doing. It really is absurd. All right, we're going to take a phone call. John in Barbados, I'm going to start with you, but then I'm going to have to take you through the station break into the third hour, okay?
Okay, Michael. Aloha, and I'm here just to comment on an article that was in Veterans Today about Russia and this nonsense going to war. You know, America thinks they're surrounding Russia with all these weapons, but you know, where are the brains of these people? If you look at the situation, Russia is surrounding America with its submarines, and they could wipe America out in 10 minutes.
Well, Washington, D.C. Has this tragic recent history of poorly thought out policy decisions. John, we got to take a break for our station ID. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with John in Barbados about this rush to get these wars going. And from the U.S. point of view, it's not an option any longer. They're having to push forward. If they don't have a war going before the economy implodes, then the American people are going to point the finger of guilt at Wall Street and their enablers in Washington, D.C. So they need a war to blame it on. And from the bankers who profit from war, they don't care which side wins or loses. They'd be perfectly happy to see the United States lose World War III because they're making money off of both sides. And so this war is being pushed forward not with a question of can we win or are we going to lose, but a question of who's going to make the lion's share of the profit. Johnny, you there? Yeah, there you are.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what I put is, why do Americans not use the brains they were born with? Russia and China have enough nuclear firepower based in submarines off the east and west coast of the USA to wipe out the USA several times over. I mean, the people in Washington are not even considering their common sense.
Well, especially with the new generation of nuclear weapons from both Russia and China can evade the U.S. ballistic missile defense system, which is based on a doctrine of a predictable inbound ballistic path. That's gone out the window. But you know what's going on? All of these people already have their bunkers. I mean, they make fun of preppers out here among the American people, but the government are the biggest preppers of all. They've got all these huge underground bunkers, the Greenbrier, Weather Mountain, or Mount Weather. They've got one here in the middle of the H3 built into the volcanic rock there. There's one under the new Denver airport. They've been building their underground bunkers. If they start a nuclear war and it goes the wrong way, they're going to be fine. They're going to stay underground for 6 months and come on up and, wow, look at all the room here we've got now because all those useless eaters are dead and gone.
Well, what I want to turn to now is the state of the police force in America compared with what it is in the UK. Now, in the UK, in Britain, the police force are now talking about bringing the army in because policemen don't want to be armed. They're, 1,500 or so short of armed police officers in the UK. So they're talking about bringing the army in to guard government buildings like the House of Commons, maybe Buckingham House, places like that. Because the police in the UK still really imagine themselves to be an unarmed force.
Yeah, that's always been a traditional part of the British police is they don't carry guns, and they don't need to. They're able to do what they do without needing all of this armor and everything. And certainly having an armed police is a danger to society. The United States proves that. The police are murdering more innocent Americans than all the criminals and terrorists put together. And no, that's not worth it to live in a safe society, because we don't live in a safe society.
Well, I remember that incident in New York when there was firing at a guy from all directions and injured how many other people?
Nine bystanders shot, all by the New York Police Department.
Yep. So, I mean, it's crazy. The whole system is crazy. When even with these knife-wielding and gun-wielding people in the UK, they managed to bring it to a reasonable conclusion without anybody getting killed or injured.
Well, you know, they could calm a lot of this violence down if they would just start taking a closer look at those prescription psychiatric medications, because it's well documented. These, and it's even in the package insert now. You know, these medications can cause suicidal behavior, violent outbursts, even some of these new medicines on the TV commercials. When you listen to that guy who's talking really fast at the end, I'm starting to catch, you know, suicidal thoughts and violent behavior are now indications on these medications. They're not just putting that there to be entertaining. I'm sure they would rather not put it there. But they're looking at lawsuits and they want to be able to say, well, yeah, you took the pill and you murdered your own family, but we warned you it could happen, therefore you can't sue us.
Well, again, this rush to war with Russia, it seems to be Europe that's going to take the brunt initially.
Oh, there's no question about it, and that's why ordinary people in Europe are definitely not on board this. I mean, their rulers are the anointed, selected leaders by the European Union. They're all going to make money off their stocks in the munitions companies, and they all have dreams of glory and victory and having statues erected to their honor. But for the ordinary people in Europe, World War II is still a current event. The scars from both world wars are still visible as you go around Europe. For us here in America, war is kind of an abstract thing. Yes, there are some battlefields preserved from the Civil War, but most have been carefully landscaped where you don't realize how horrible it really was when it happened. But the people in Europe, they understand. The Third World War, like the first two, is going to be fought on their front yards, and they are not happy about that.
And then finally, Michael, I'd like to look at what's really happening in Europe with this immigration crisis. People are fighting back now. They're you know, even Merkel is now looking at getting voted out of office next year when they get the elections there. So, and Cameron isn't looking too stable either.
Cameron wasn't looking stable when he first took office. I mean, yeah.
But actually, I mean, he took office by vote fraud. You know, I mean...
Yeah, that's become the norm. That's become the norm, you know, because when you're trying to conquer a planet, the first thing you have to get rid of is real, accurate, honest, and fair elections, or you're going to get, voted out of office very, very, very quickly. But, yeah, everyone's rushing headlong into a war because they think wars are going to fix or at least distract from their self-made economic disaster. And they're doing it because the last two times it worked. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are at the point where we've got this British general saying it's perfectly plausible that we're going to be in a nuclear war with Russia next year.
Unfortunately now, with these small strap-on boosters to the Iskander, they can reach London with their Iskander nukes. So they're going to incinerate planet Earth if they don't calm this nonsense down.
Oh yeah, and it's all in this fight over whose brand of ink and paper we're all going to use for the next century. You will use the dollar, or we will burn the planet up. I mean, that's insane. Nobody would even make a movie with that as a storyline because nobody would believe it. But that's what's really going on.
Well, unfortunately, I know there's pushback now. It looks very likely that the EU and the banking system in the EU is on the point of collapse.
Same thing here in the United States. That's why they're trying to get the war going. If this whole economic crash happens and they don't have a villain to blame it on, you're going to see people turning on their governments. I mean, you look at the protests that are still going on in France, the stuff that's going on down in Venezuela. This push to create a single global government has created a social climate in which we could see a global revolution where the people of every nation kick out their oligarchs all at the same time. That would be a good thing if it could be accomplished without a lot of bloodshed.
Well, I'm looking at, as well as Venezuela, where there's these food shortages. Just look at America and Britain's road transport systems. They're falling apart. They're going down the pan.
Yes, they are. We're starting to see huge empty gaps on the store shelves here. And again, the rail indices and trucking indices in the United States continue to decline, and it's getting to be a scramble. And some of the supermarkets, I think, are starting to turn back to local providers because these big corporations just aren't shipping things anymore. They don't have enough orders. Anyway, listen, John, thank you very much for the phone call. Got to let you go. And again, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Apparently, Gap, the clothing retailer, is getting ready to close 53 of their Old Navy stores in Japan. I'm not surprised about that. The stuff was really, it looked like poor people's clothing being sold as a designer item. And if you're a hot model, yeah, it can look okay. But it really didn't work to average people. All told, Gap is closing 75 of their stores. And again, in a consumer economy, if the consumers don't have any money, they're not going to be buying the latest fashion trend no matter what supermodel is seen wearing it. They're going to hang on to their clothing longer. They're going to try and make it last. They're going to take up sewing again to repair things as buttons come off and so forth. This planned obsolescence, constantly buying the same thing over and over and over again model falls apart when the people don't have any money left. They couldn't have wrecked this economy more if they were trying. All right, here we are. Let's talk about human-caused global warming. It's that part of the show here. And we're seeing an article that came out of no less than Scientific American declaring there is a 99% chance 2016 will be the hottest year on record. And, of course, they're relying on NASA, which stands for Never a Straight Answer, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who are out there saying, yes, this is what's going on. And both NASA and NOAA have been caught rigging the data and cheating to come up with these numbers so that Scientific American can say, these government agencies are telling you 2016 is going to be the hottest year on record, and it's all your fault, and you will atone by paying your carbon taxes. Because if you can't trust the government that told you Saddam had nuclear weapons, who can you trust? So, to recap on this whole situation. On one side, you have all of these various institutions, agencies, media outlets, which are being funded and directed to prove, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, humans are warming the earth so that a desperately broke and hopelessly in-debt U.S. government can impose a carbon tax on an already overtaxed people. And remember, if they start taxing carbon, people are just going to have to do without something else. So the net economic activity remains constant. The tax revenues remain a constant. It's not really going to fix anything. But they don't think about this. Then on the other side, out here in the real world, you have all these record-setting winters we've experienced over the last several years, including the current one, in which snow is still falling here and there a month before the official start of summer. In the southern hemisphere, their winter has arrived early. So, are you going to take the word of the same government that claims 92 million out-of-work Americans translates to a 5% jobless rate, or are you going to trust your own senses? The empirical evidence is the sun has entered a period of reduced activity, a repeat of the Maunder minimum, and is bringing with it a repeat of the Little Ice Age. And we see all those people who bet their reputations on Al Gore's human-caused global warming hysteria struggling desperately not to have to admit they were made total fools of, which does include Scientific American, National Geographic, and all of these TV networks. Now, there's another article out here over at the Daily Mail, how renewable energy is actually another scam. It's a green criminal machine, and they're talking about how all these companies got all these taxpayer subsidized loans, and they got all this money, they paid themselves huge salaries, and they produced absolute junk that's already falling apart, and these companies are already going bankrupt because they were never really viable. But it was a get-rich-quick scheme for all these cronies who were getting all these handouts from the Obama administration. Now, for those of you living in the Pacific Northwest, don't put away the parka just yet. There's another cold front coming down from Alaska. They are predicting more snow for the Pacific Northwest this weekend. I'm not kidding you. That's really coming on down. All right, let's take a phone call. Ralph in New York City, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? I just want to ask you a hypothetical question. What would it be like this after the election? What would a Christmas shopping season would be like for 2016? That's the new topic everyone's talking about now. What's your opinion on this?
It's going to be worse than the last several Christmas shopping seasons we've already had. Until you get money back into the hands of the population, they're not going to be able to go to the store and buy anything. And nobody wants more debt. They don't, the credit card companies are out there saying, you can do all the Christmas shopping you want. Look, we'll give you all this plastic stuff. But by and large, the American people are far more honorable than the U.S. government. We do not want to borrow any money until we are confident we will be able to pay it back. Unlike the U.S. government, which borrows like crazy and just presumes that future taxpayers will somehow get it all covered. And so, we've been seeing Christmas after Christmas after Christmas. It's become a disaster. And this Christmas is going to be even worse.
Well, I'm just saying, even though I'm just saying, you figure through Thanksgiving and then coming up the major holidays is going to be disastrous. Everyone's focusing on the election. But I don't think there's going to be an election. Everyone's presuming that there'll be a distraction before the holidays kick in. What's your opinion on this one? We cannot rule that out. We could see an economic crash, which is already defined as a legal justification for Obama to activate all these presidential executive orders, suspending the Constitution, taking complete control of the country. That could happen. We could find ourselves in a war. But absent those dramatic situations, what we've seen over the last couple of years is that more and more people are going back to making their own needs for the holidays, doing their own cooking, making gifts and giving them away, and people are actually pulling away from this idea that Christmas is a chance to show how rich you are to all your friends and family, and they're actually going back closer to the original meaning of Christmas, of getting together with family and friends and just, sharing the good times. And, of course, for the American Christmas, which has always been a marketing ploy, and I learned that one by experiencing Christmas in Europe years ago, again, the retail establishment looks at that holiday shopping season from Black Friday through Christmas. That's where they get their profits. 1/3 of the revenue for the retail chains comes in from that season. And you see all these stores like Macy's and Sports Authority shutting down all these stores around the country and all these computer shops. And you're starting to see all over here throughout New York and New Jersey, and you see all these shops shut down little by little. Those are the signs I see around me.
Oh, yesterday I drove Claire over for a dental appointment, and it's in a small strip mall, and 2/3 of that mall is now shut down. It's just a disaster. At our mall down here at the bottom, Aeropostale already has the clearance going out of business signs up because they're going down. Gap is shutting down.
Radio Shack.
I would say I missed Radio Shack, but I missed the Radio Shack as it was when I was a kid, when it basically got away from building your own electronics, and got into the same consumer devices as everybody else. They kind of destroyed themselves on that one. But we're going to start seeing an acceleration of retail closings. We're just at the takeoff point. It is really going to start becoming obvious before the end of the year.
Wow. Okay, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Obi in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to comment on something on the global warming issue. Geology was my major in college, and I remember getting to see some of the ice core samples from Antarctica, which showed that there's been times in the past that our CO2 level's been much higher. And the cause of that is one word, volcanoes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, volcanoes are the source of the El Nino current. That's been pretty much established. When Al Gore showed a correlation between global temperature and CO2, he tried to claim it was CO2 was driving the warming. But if you zoomed in on the data, you would see that the warming happened first, and then some 100 years later, then the CO2 went up, which makes sense. When you have a warmer planet, there is more biological activity. But Al Gore reversed it in order to claim that CO2 was the villain, humans were the cause of CO2, and you would buy and sell Al Gore's carbon credits. And it worked. He is on the verge of being the world's first carbon billionaire, and that's the reason he did it. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Obi, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We've been talking about human-caused global warming. And the reality is it's just another in a long series of hoaxes perpetrated on people by their rulers. And it is not unusual. It is not shocking. It is not scandalous. It is business as usual. And once you understand that governments rule their people primarily with lies, fraud, and deception, the patterns become clear. Over at my website, we've got an article of the liars, by the liars, and for the liars. And it just lists out example after example after example throughout history of monumental frauds perpetrated on the general population by political and religious leaders to get what they want. Because ultimately, power is the willingness and ability to do things the ordinary population doesn't. We are raised from childhood being taught that we shouldn't lie, because that gives governments that do lie an advantage over us. We assume that everybody is as truthful as we are, including our politicians. And we know what assume means. We are raised from childhood to be told that stealing is wrong, which gives the advantage to governments which are stealing from us on an ongoing basis, because we are hindered from stealing back. We are taught from childhood that we should not kill. And we have governments that kill all the time, whether they call it lethal injection, drone strike, anti-terror operations, termination with extreme prejudice, or outright war. And in that context, you begin to understand exactly the kind of people that are in positions of rulership. And they may go to bed at night thinking that the willingness to lie, cheat, steal, torture, and kill makes them superior human beings, but it doesn't. They're simply human beings who are willing to lie, cheat, steal, torture, and kill. That's it. That's the only difference. And some of these rulers are pretty dumb. They don't think clearly about what they're doing. They just exercise their power and they think that's all it takes, until they make that inevitable mistake one step too far, like King Charles I, or Louis XVI, or Ceausescu, or Mussolini, when their own ego gets control of them, and they stop realizing that that mass of people that they are controlling are human beings with feelings, with their own needs and their own desires. When you start viewing the population as just an asset, as a resource, as a herd, or human capital, you do so at your own peril, because you are sowing the seeds for an uprising. Louis XVI, when he was finally captured, literally was at a loss. He couldn't understand why the people of France didn't still love him. He was that clueless and out of touch with what was going on in the streets of France. And I see continuing indications that our federal government is seriously out of touch with what's going on in the streets of America. And we are looking at this horrible situation of there's going to be an economic collapse, global, or there's going to be a global world war. And I wish there was a third path out of here that was peaceful. But unfortunately, these rulers of the world think bloodshed and torture and impoverishment of the people are their divine right. And you're not going to be able to get them to change their minds about it. They think they're the good people. We know better. But again, they think that willingness to lie, cheat, steal, torture, and kill, commit war, genocide, makes them superior human beings. Andrew Carnegie literally thought that the super rich were a completely separate species of human being from the ordinary workers, and that they should treat them as an inferior class. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with more science and technology news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get into the science and other such stuff here, interesting article just came out over at ToledoBlade.com where Hillary Clinton has gone on the warpath against Donald Trump. And because her effort to portray him as unfriendly to women has cratered, she's basically on out there and saying, well, he's not qualified to be president. He just absolutely is not qualified to be president. And I think she's opening herself up to some rather absurd arguments here. And let me start with this quote. This is a quote from Hillary Clinton. She was asked, as part of her presidential campaign, what her accomplishments were as Secretary of State. And this is how she replied. This was on March 11th, back in 2014. My accomplishments as Secretary of State, well, I'm glad you asked. My proudest accomplishment, in which I take the most pride, mostly because of the opposition it faced early on, you know, the remnants of prior situations and mindsets that were too narrowly focused in a manner whereby they may have overlooked the bigger picture. And we didn't do that, and I'm proud of that. Very proud. I would say that's a major accomplishment, end quote. In other words, there wasn't anything she did as Secretary of State that she can point to with pride. Certainly the handling of Benghazi, the handling of Libya as a whole. Now, right now, Hillary is out there claiming she is more qualified to be President of the United States because she's the wife of a former president. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. But seriously, if you are sick, do you want the wife of the surgeon operating on you in that hospital? When you travel and you finally get past the TSA, do you want the wife of the pilot flying that jetliner? I don't. I want somebody who knows what they are doing, fulfilling these tasks. Now, is Donald Trump an experienced politician? No, but that's what people like about him. The establishment isn't working. It's time for an outsider. Donald Trump does know how to create companies and create jobs. He knows how to build things. He knows how to make stuff happen in the economy. And that is a body of knowledge almost totally absent from our current established political class of perpetual parasites whose only job experience is taking money away from one group of people and giving it to somebody else in exchange for the appropriate bribes. I am reading this attack by Hillary as her growing panic that Trump is gaining in the polls against her. Hillary's also out there saying that, hey, the primary season is over. I will be the Democratic nominee. We should just call off the rest of the elections. She is letting her ego get the better of her. All right, let's get on back to the science news. The other day we were talking about this case where there is an individual, former Philadelphia police officer, who is being kept in solitary confinement for refusing to decrypt the hard drives from his computer. Now, they're framing this in the idea that this guy has child porn and you shouldn't care about his civil rights. But there are no exceptions to the Bill of Rights. And digging into this a little bit more, it turns out the entire allegation that he has child porn is a single witness who thinks maybe some time ago there was an image on one of his devices that may have qualified as child porn. And they don't even know that it was this particular computer the hard drives came from. So already we're looking at a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They don't actually have any actionable evidence that he's been doing what he's been doing. And they've been keeping him in isolation. And the government is out there saying that we have the right to keep him in solitary confinement until he dies for failing to comply with our demand to decrypt his devices. Now, that's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. You are not compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against yourself. You are under no obligation to help the government build a case against yourself. Now, maybe this guy did what they said. We don't know. Clearly, they don't actually have a case against him yet. They're hoping that if he decrypts the drives, there'll be something that they can find to prosecute him with. But it doesn't matter what this guy has done or not done. This is another government attack on the Bill of Rights, and it cannot be tolerated. Our entire legal system was set up by the Founding Fathers to protect the innocent at all times, even at the risk of occasionally allowing the guilty to go free. And that applies here. The government's entire case is one hearsay statement and a bunch of their experts who are saying they're pretty much convinced there's something on the hard drive, even though they can't read it. In fact, one of the government's witnesses literally said it's their best guess that there will be child porn found on those devices. Now, I think child porn is pretty sick. But this is a constitutional issue. And again, it is better to let a guilty person go free than to allow an innocent person to be railroaded into prison. And certainly to not suffer any more attacks on that Bill of Rights. That Bill of Rights exists to protect you from an abusive government. These rights are not given to you by the government. The Bill of Rights is where the government says, all right, starting out from square one, these are the rules that we have to follow. And if the government will not follow those rules, it is neither the legal nor legitimate government of this land. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Denise in Rhode Island. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Michael. I just want to say you're doing such a great job with, WhatReallyHappened.com, and I plagiarized the crap out of you.
You have my permission. You have blanket permission. Anything original? Okay, let me get one thing in here. Anything original from my website is open for public copying, reposting, whatever. It's out there, public domain.
That's awesome. That's really awesome that you do that. I do my best, too. I've been doing things like over the years through mailings, emailings, and websites myself. Now, I'm not as big as you, but, I have been doing, pretty much as best I can with what knowledge I have and everything. But one of the things that...
Well, I'm not as big as I used to be. I've been on a diet.
You're still... No, you're not big like that, okay? But you're big in my book as far as, giving me the right kind of information I'm looking for. At any time when I just want to just find something on the spot, I usually just go right to your website anyway and just grab it off. If I don't have it, you'll have it. I know you do. But that's wonderful that you are doing this and everything. One of my biggest beefs right now, though, is how Hillary and Bill have gotten away with so many things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about this with another friend of mine who lives in Virginia and another friend who lives in South Carolina. We have our little political talks and everything. We do a three-way conversation. And basically our talks are along the lines of how, the Clintons have managed to get away with all the things that they've been getting. We're just sweeping it under, people dying around them. And I'm just looking at this whole situation with the polls now with Bernie Sanders. I am a Trump supporter, but I still like Bernie, too. I mean, I think he's an okay guy. He may,
I agree. I agree. I agree. I'm cheering for Bernie. I'm cheering for Bernie.
I mean, really. I mean, he's a good guy. He doesn't have skeletons, fumbling out of the closet when you open up his closet door. The same thing with Trump. I mean, he's transparent. He's Captain Teflon. You throw shit at him and it'll slide off.
Okay, you got to be careful. You got to be careful. You got to be careful what language you use on these phone calls, because we have on-air affiliates, and we have to mind our language so we don't jeopardize their radio license. And I understand the United States is a nation that is torturing people and dropping, drone strikes on innocent people around the world. But we're not allowed to use dirty words on the radio to prove we're a just and moral people.
Okay, not a problem. Thanks. Sorry about that. That was a little dirty word, but I won't say that again.
Please don't.
Anyway, no problem. Sorry about that. But they are the epitome of crime, in my humble opinion. The Clintons. They've gotten away with things in Arkansas. They've gotten away with things during their political careers. And here they are now trying to, worm their way back into the White House again.
They're not trying to worm their way back in. They're trying to steal it. Hillary's trying to steal it. She's absolutely caught up with the idea of being the first woman president of the United States, and she will do anything to get that White House, and that means if she does succeed in getting it, she will do anything with it. And that right there is a red warning flag when you look at the stuff her husband was doing. And yes, you need to look at their criminal career, and it is amazing how much they've gotten away with, because they're masters of having blackmail information on everybody around them.
You would think with the information age that we're living in, even we know that their own supporters have been walking away and going to the Trump camp. But you would think that all these people that would support them, that they would open up their eyes and really see, what monsters these people are.
No, they're not going to do it. I mean, Hillary's supporters know exactly what kind of person she is. They don't care. They're caught up in their ideologies. Hillary's campaign is a personality cult, which is another warning sign. It's like you have all these feminists out there who say, we have to have a woman president. We don't care what she's like. It's just important to have a woman president. You have the LGBT community, which is out there saying, we're going to have a gay president, and we don't care what she's like. And that's a really lousy way to be running a country, where, you're being asked to vote based...
You can be gay and be president. You just should not be gay and have a criminal history behind you and everything trying to...
We've already had a gay president. Lincoln...
Yes, the thing is, they were out there parading it around. It wasn't a big issue like transgender bathrooms and the things that are going on right now. These are all distractions. They really are. That's the biggest distraction of them all. How big of a percentage do we have of transgender people that really need this bathroom issue to go forward? I really think that's just like a major distraction.
It is a distraction, but again, I see it as also part of this larger campaign to try and get us confused about who we are, to destroy our sense of identity, whether it's gender identity, cultural identity, historical identity, ethnic identity, religious identity, because if we're not sure who we are, it is more difficult for us to stand up in opposition to authority figures.
I agree. I know one thing for sure is that, I'm half white, I'm half Indian, and I just feel at this point and everything, I'm not asking for anybody. I never even took advantage of Indian anything. All right, I just remain who I am. I have, a pretty, a wide ethnic background and everything from England and also from America and everything. What really creeps me out about this whole thing is the fact that everybody has to have a title. Everybody has to have, something given back to them for all the terrible things that their ancestors have done. I identify with the hurt and the pain of the past, but I don't see how we can make that better now, except for to move on and everything. I'm not getting that part either. But, another thing that's, really on my mind that's really bothered me is the fact that the Clintons can just do things. And I just don't understand why they can just do things and people just don't fit. I got something that I got from your site about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
I mean, this man is a known pedophile, and Clinton had actually traveled with this man. We're living in a day and age of information at the touch of your fingers and everything. I wouldn't be a Trump supporter if I didn't have information at the touch of my fingers. I'd be sitting in the background going, yeah, same business as usual, and everything. They're just going to vote for who they want. They don't care about what we want. But he cares about what we want. And I see him trying to, not backpedal.
I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I don't get a strong sense that Trump has an inherent altruism, care, and concern for the American people. He's thinking as a businessman and realizing that how Washington, D.C. runs the country is not very good from a business point of view. And, I think what Trump wants to do is put America back on a business-like footing, innovating, developing, inventing, industries, selling, marketing, peace through commerce around the world. And I think that is really where he's coming from. Plus his ego. Let's be honest, he's got an ego.
We're on the same page. That's exactly what I was wanting to say. But definitely, but that's really all I wanted to say is, I wanted to, just let you know that you're doing a great job. It's the first time I've ever called you. I hope to call you again sometime in the future when something even bigger comes up, maybe. But,
well, I look forward to it. I look forward to it. All right. Well, listen. Thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go here because we're coming up to the top of the end of the show, actually, and I got a few more things I got to cover here. The other day we were talking about how the United Nations had come on out saying that glyphosate is safe. It's not causing cancer. You can ignore the World Health Organization when they say that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. And this despite the fact that there are farmers groups filing class action lawsuits against Monsanto because they were using glyphosate on their farms and they all came down with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's one of these lawsuits out in Redlands, but we can trust the United Nations. The same organization told us humans are warming the planet when they come out and say glyphosate is not causing cancer. But it turns out, remember I said proves the UN is just as corruptible as any other organization? Turns out that two of the people on this panel that came out with this ridiculous claim that glyphosate does not cause cancer have deep financial ties to the agrochemical industry. These two people at the UN are associated with groups that have accepted over $1 million from Monsanto. And these are Professor Alan Bubis, chairman of the UN panel investigating glyphosate. He was the boss of it all. And Professor Angelo Moretto, the panel's co-chair. In other words, the two guys in charge of the panel are financially tangled up with Monsanto. Gee, I wonder why they came out and said glyphosate doesn't cause cancer. It's amazing. And this is becoming epidemic, this kind of corporate corruption. Apparently, the National Research Council was scheduled to release its multi-year research report on GMO food and GM crops. And Food and Water Watch beat them to it and basically pointed out that the National Research Council, like the UN panel, have financial ties to the biotech and ag companies. These biotech companies have made so much money, they are able to go out and buy whatever politicians and UN officials and scientists they need to try and convince you that, hey, those rats wanted to have tumors in that French test. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, German drug and chemical group Bayer, you probably know mostly from Bayer aspirin, has extended an unsolicited takeover proposal to Monsanto, wanting to acquire them to create the world's biggest agricultural supplier in order to monopolize the converging pesticide and seeds market, pesticides and seeds designed to work with them. This is a disaster in the making because we have Monsanto, which is pushing GMO and glyphosate despite clear indications they're harmful, merging with Bayer, which knowingly sold HIV-tainted hemophilia medicine to the public. So we have two giant corporations with absolutely no sense of social responsibility about to be merged into one giant mutated mess. Meanwhile, down in Argentina, Monsanto has been unable to convince the Argentine government, mostly the Argentine people, to allow GMO soybeans into Argentina. So we can expect there to be some kind of a covert U.S. Attempt to overthrow the Argentine government and put in a puppet ruler who will welcome GMO with open arms. Now, for those of you living in the American Midwest, and we actually have relatives there, there's this very troubling story out of 4 Winds 10 saying that radiation coming from the leaking tanks at Hanford has now blown as far east as Chicago and Milwaukee and is continuing to head east towards Indiana and Ohio on the prevailing winds, primarily the jet stream. And this might be a good time, if you are living in those areas, to think about getting an inexpensive radiation detector. Now, the really inexpensive ones, unfortunately, will only detect beta and gamma radiation. If you've got the cash, you really ought to think about getting one that detects alpha radiation as well. Because while alpha radiation outside your body is not a problem, if you ingest or inhale a particle that is an alpha emitter, it's going to get stuck in there. There's no way to get it out. And, radiation, contamination is the gift that keeps on giving. More and more people are starting to become very concerned about a nuclear scandal that took place in Southern California that was never made public. And this is going back to that Santa Susana laboratory over in the San Fernando and Simi valleys in Southern California, which is heavily contaminated. They had a major nuclear reactor meltdown right there in the middle of San Fernando and Simi valleys. And it was a sodium core reactor. It was an experimental reactor. There was a brief flirtation with them. Basically, the U.S. and Russia have stopped messing with them because they're just impossible to make safe. Kind of makes you wonder what else has been going on that the government never tells you about. There's been yet another holistic doctor found dead in an overturned car, Dr. Curtis Clogston, 68. Police are saying no suspicion of foul play, but it does merit attention because Clogston's medical position was definitely anti-pharmaceutical. Meanwhile, 99.6% of Germans have been found to have glyphosate residues in their body. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Thanks to everybody who's reaching in to donate, because we really do need the help to replace all this equipment that's falling apart. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.